Hello Twin Peaks fans. Today I'm going to be ranking the characters from the first couple of seasons of Twin Peaks. Now I would say, without a doubt, Twin Peaks is my favourite TV show of all time. And by Twin Peaks I mean the first two seasons. And Fire Walk with Me. Fire Walk with Me is an important, if not integral part of the overall canon, so I do like to include it. So I feel like I have enough of an understanding, enough of a context during the last 7 years, because I started watching Twin Peaks when I was 13, and it hooked me pretty much straight away. So I feel like I have a necessary understanding of the plot and the characters and the canon to be able to rank some of these characters, because I'm not going to be ranking every single one of these characters. Only the characters that I feel are significant to the wider show, have enough of an impact on the show itself to justify their ranking. So as you can see here, the top tier has been labelled creme de la creme. You'll be getting the best of the best. I'm sure you can guess who will be featuring in that tier. And then below that we have the great tier. So characters who are fantastic but might not quite reach that level, the level of certain characters, but would still be in and around the 8 to 9 out of 10 score. And then underneath that we have the good tier, so characters who are fairly solid. They're not spectacular, they're just solid, enjoyable, watchable characters, probably around 7 to 8 out of 10. 50-50, in brackets filler, characters who I'm fairly undecided on. Fairly either way in terms of my opinions. They don't necessarily set the world alight, but they're not horrendous. They're probably a 6 to 5 out of 10. And then the final tier, the dear oh dear tier, where certain characters will feature. Now these characters might be different for you, but this is my overall opinion on them. I'm guessing you can slightly assume who's going to be in Dear Oh Dear, although there might be a few surprises up ahead, it depends. So, to begin with, Albert Rosenfield. He's going straight into the great tier. I really like Albert. He's one of those characters who just sticks out straight away when you think of Twin Peaks. And he has quite the story arc too, because at first he's despicable. He's rude, he's obnoxious, he has his overinflated opinion of himself, and he's constantly insulting people of Twin Peaks, whether that's Harry Truman or Andy Brennan. He's just going about creating rifts, creating tension, alienating himself from his surroundings. But as the show goes on, you start to peel back the layers, and you realise that he is a character with a good heart and a good soul, and is vying for justice and for good. And that is displayed through certain iconic moments throughout the first couple of seasons, especially in season 2, whether that's his monologue to Harry Truman about how he's on the same plight as Mahatma Gandhi, or when he very rightly compares Bob to the evil that men do. So overall, he is one of those iconic characters, and he very much belongs in the great tier. I'm sure a lot of people would have him in creme de la creme, but for me, he rightfully belongs in the great tier. Now, the first character to enter the 50-50 tier. Andrew Packard. Not one of my favourite characters. I don't despise him, but I don't find him particularly interesting. He's brought into the show when I don't feel he necessarily needed to be. I don't feel he has enough of an impact to justify being brought into the show. And it just feels like Mark Frost was clutching at very thin straws during that middle ground within season 2 or a little bit earlier to try and keep the wheels rolling after Laura's killer was revealed. He has certain moments and he has an aura about him that I can enjoy, but for the most part he doesn't fill me with much intrigue or interest, so he definitely belongs in the 50-50 tier because he's not a terrible character, but he does not interest me. Now, onto a character who rightfully belongs in the great tier, Mr. Andy Brennan. God, I love Andy. He's iconic, he's heartwarming, he has a brilliant dynamic with Lucy. You know, it starts a very love-hate relationship, continues into season 2, but they're able to realise that they just have an undying love for one another, and it's very wholesome. He's one of the most wholesome characters, not only in Twin Peaks but in TV. Very likeable, has a few slapdash moments, but these are the moments that make you love him. You know, where if he drops his gun on the floor or he steps on a wooden plank that whacks him in the face. He has this aura of warmth about him, and yeah, he's one of my favourite characters to watch on Twin Peaks. Just purely wholesome and purely good. Now, a character that has changed in my mind over the years, from a character who I wasn't entirely certain about, and a character that I didn't necessarily have much interest in, to a character who I respect, Annie Blackburn. Annie, at first in my mind, was a bit wooden, a bit stale. I felt like she was a filler character, a character used as a device to try and make Dale have this romantic love interest that ends up in a perilous situation, you know, a damsel in distress. But the more I think about it and the more I see her on screen, the more I respect her character. I think there's a level of depth to Annie that I didn't quite appreciate at first. Growing up in a convent or spending a few years in the convent and the issues that occurred when she was there, and how she doesn't necessarily feel like she fits in, and the relationship with Dale Cooper is very natural. It doesn't feel too forced, and they do have some very wholesome moments. And obviously she plays a big role towards the end of the series, the second season, and I think because of that she rightfully belongs in the good tier. I feel like she has enough interesting moments, enough of an impact on the overall show to justify being in that tier. Now, one of my favourite characters in Twin Peaks, Miss Audrey Horne. She goes straight into creme de la creme, without a doubt. Now, certain people will bring up the use of her character in season 2 and say, well, why are you putting her in the creme de la creme tier when she became fairly non-existent? I like to focus on the positives of the characters. I'm a fairly glass half full guy, and for me, Audrey has so many iconic moments that it would be crazy not to put her in creme de la creme. She's got this effortless swagger and the dynamic with Cooper and the way she goes about trying to uncover the mystery of Laura Palmer, and her defiant and bossy persona, it's brilliant. And her relationship with her father as well, the tensions. She's a phenomenal character because she's quite complex. She's not just a troublemaker. There is a sadness and a need for attention there, and I've always warmed towards her. She's quite simply a brilliant character and one of the best that Twin Peaks has to offer. The less said about the romance between her and John Justice Wheeler, the better. Because I'm sure a lot of people out there wanted to see her and Cooper get together, but I think that would have ruined Dale Cooper's character if that had happened. So it's a tricky one with Audrey and romance, but like I said, she's iconic. Her dance in the Double R Diner, need I say any more? Now, another creme de la creme character and another member of the Horn family, Ben Horn. I love him. He's a schemer. He's not particularly nice whatsoever. He does care about his family. He does care about his legacy. But yeah, quite a dastardly character. Has a brilliant relationship with his brother Jerry, where they bounce off each other from the moment that Jerry is introduced in season 1. They just have this fantastic dynamic, and Ben Horn's overall impact on the wider plot cannot be denied. He is one of the most important characters in Twin Peaks, and he has a lot of investments and a lot of double crossings. Like, he owns One Eye Jacks. He wants to create the Ghostwood estate. He's trying and failing to find investors, whether they're Norwegian or they're Icelandic. He's always trying to better his position and further himself. And he's a fascinating character because, like his daughter Audrey, they're both very complex. They're not just mischievous. They're not just, evil. They do have a warmth to them, and that's why a character like Ben Horn ranks so highly, because he is complex, he is funny, he's witty, he's charming, he's sly. He is an anti-hero essentially. Now, from creme de la creme tier to a few tiers below, John Justice Wheeler. Like Andrew Packard, just a character that I don't necessarily care about much. I would actually put John Justice Wheeler above Andrew Packard if I can, because ultimately I feel like he has more of an impact on the wider plot. I haven't gone back and watched the midpoint of season 2 much, as I'm sure a lot of us haven't. So a character like John Justice Wheeler, although is significant enough to be in this tier list or this tier ranking, I don't feel belongs in any other tier besides 50/50. Has a few interesting moments. Obviously has the romantic arc with Audrey, and I think there's one key moment where he's sitting by the fire and he's having an intimate and honest conversation with Dale Cooper. But besides that, just not a character that sticks out in the mind. Not a character that I think, wow, he has such an impact on the wider plot. Just one of those characters that, not necessarily filler, but just feels a little bit bland. So I feel 50/50, or in brackets filler, is the best place for him. On to a much better character in my opinion, Blackie. For me, it's hard. She's somewhere between good and great. I'm going to put her at the top of the good tier for now, although that might change. She might enter great, because she is an interesting character. She runs One Eye Jacks on behalf of Mr. Horn, and she has a very sly and sultry way about her. She's part of that seedy side of Twin Peaks. You know, you have that angelic side, the wholesome side that certain characters represent. Well, she represents the darker side of Twin Peaks, and she like Audrey in a sense. She does tend to get what she wants, although she is underestimated by the Horn brothers, and she ultimately has quite a nasty demise at the hands of Jean Reno. Now, if you didn't know that, my bad, but surely if you're watching this tier list, you should know that by now. But she's an interesting character. She's mysterious. She's quite cruel. She belongs in the good tier. She has enough significance. Now, a character who is actually the first character in the Dear Oh Dear tier, Blackie's sister. See, she's just not interesting. She doesn't interest me in the slightest. Her character is vague, quite annoying. She just serves as Jean Reno's girlfriend, essentially, lover. It's hard to say, but she's not interesting. She's memorable, but she's not interesting. She belongs in Dear Oh Dear, because I don't feel she's 50-50. There's not a moment where I think, oh wow, she's interesting. She doesn't have an Andrew Packard or a John Justice Wheeler moment or moments where there are certain times where I think, okay, I like this character. I get why this character's been introduced. With her, she just feels so reminiscent of a filler character and nothing more. So for me, she belongs in the Dear Oh Dear tier. What a contradiction for our next character, because Bobby Briggs is going straight into creme de la creme. Now there will come a time where I do actually put these characters in order. I'm just ranking them instinctively at the moment, but there will come a time where I put them in order. And for me, Bobby quite comfortably fits in the creme de la creme tier. Like Albert, has quite the character arc. He starts off as this rebellious, an angry young man, and by the end of the show, tries to further himself and become a better person, and I'd say has a great character arc. I do like with a lot of these characters, they have certain dynamics with characters that I adore. And for me, I love the dynamic that he has with his father, Garland Briggs, or Major Briggs. And how can we forget that scene in the Double R Diner where Major Briggs is relaying his dream to his son, and Bobby breaks down in tears. It's just such a beautiful and tender moment, especially after the conflict between the two in earlier episodes within season 1, like the funeral, for example, or prior to the funeral, where Garland tries to reassure him and Bobby just hits the roof. But I love Bobby. He's such a likable character. I love his relationship with Shelley. He he's such an integral part of the plot in Fire Walk with Me as well as the first 2 seasons. So, and he's a style icon. So, for me, he is creme de la creme, without a doubt, without a doubt. So, up next, we have his mum, Mrs. Briggs. For me, she's 50-50. She has some good moments where she's a reassuring character, or quite, yeah, I'd say within the wholesome categorization, but she just doesn't have enough of an influence on the wider plot or enough interesting moments for her to be anywhere higher up this list. And I'm sure plenty of people, 95% of viewers would agree with me. Now, easy creme de la creme ranking. Bob. Bob doesn't have many lines. Bob with Bob there's a feeling. It's just this feeling of pure terror that comes with him at every moment. You know, it's reminiscent of the line that Mike utters early on in season 2, I believe. He's Bob, eager for fun, he wears a smile, everybody run. It's just one of those characters that sticks out in the mind as just the embodiment of pure terror. And it's amazing to think that he was one of Lynch's happy accidents. He wasn't written into the show from the very beginning. He's a character that occurred because Frank Silver, the actor, rest in peace, was hunched behind the bed. He was like, I believe he was the prop man, and he was hunched behind the bed. And Lynch or a few of the crew or the casting crew saw him and they were like, bloody hell, he looks absolutely terrifying. And from that point onwards, the character of Bob develops, and he is the character he is today, this living embodiment of fear. Has an integral part in the first 2 seasons, as well as Fire Walk With Me. Just this demonic presence, whether that be when he appears in the pilot or he's creeping towards the camera in early season 2, or in this case to Maddie Ferguson, or in Lonely Souls, where you can see the conflict, or where you can see the possession within Leland, and in the Black Lodge in the series 2 finale, where he takes Windermel's soul and he's toying with Cooper, and he's just this unbelievable presence within Twin Peaks. Animalistic and purely evil, and he is a creme de la creme character without a shadow of a doubt. I love the character himself. I just think he's such a terrifying character, and by far the most terrifying villain that I've encountered in television. So Bob, for me, love the character because he's just purely evil, belongs in the creme de la creme too. Another creme de la creme character, I'm gonna leave Philip Jeffries because I think that although there are certain scenes where he can be deemed significant, I don't think he's significant enough. And as you can see with the rest of these characters, including Teresa Banks, I just don't think they are significant enough to make it onto this tier list. So I'm sure plenty of people would include Philip Jeffries, but for me, I will leave him out. But I might revisit this tier list at some point, and I will include him. But another creme de la creme character for me, Major Briggs. I love him. He just exudes this aura of warmth and stoicism and wisdom that I find utterly inspirational. He's one of those characters that makes you want to be a better person, and very complex. Obviously has a wider reach within the overall universe, being part of UFO surveillance for the American government, and is transported to the White Lodge and returns a different person. Sadly, the character or the actor of Major Briggs passed away 14 years ago. Actually, a couple of days ago, 14 years ago, he passed away. So he wasn't able to reappear in the return. But during his time on Twin Peaks in the first couple of seasons, he makes has such a big influence on the overall show. Like I said earlier, I truly love that scene in the diner where he he tells Bobby about the dream he had. It's one of the best, most memorable scenes in Twin Peaks, and for a man who's so austere, he has such heart, and that's why I love him, and that's why he easily belongs in creme de la creme. Now, back to the great tier. We have Catherine Martell. Similar in a sense to Ben Horne. They are yet again one of the double acts within Twin Peaks, and I think that's why Twin Peaks is such a great show, because you have certain character dynamics that just are fantastic. I haven't mentioned some of the most important yet because they are yet to come. Fairly soon, probably. But I just love Catherine Martell. If I actually might put her ahead of Andy for now, although, like I said, I will properly arrange them at some point soon. This might be a two-parter. It depends, but this will be the first part in that case. So I might not get round to the final rearrangement, but that might be part of part two. But that will be part of part two. But Catherine Martell, similar to Ben Horne, just one of these dastardly characters in Twin Peaks that are trying to create a dynasty in a sense, and trying to assume power and take control and one up people and double cross, and she's a fascinating character because she's the type of character that just stands up for herself at any moment, always believes she's right, has a hilarious and ridiculous relationship with her husband where they just Pete, obviously, who will appear later on in this tier ranking. But she's one of those characters that represents the more seedy side of Twin Peaks, and yeah, rightfully so, is a great character. She has an overall reach on the plot, obviously involving the sawmill, seeing as it's owned by her family, or by Josie in this case, and was formerly owned by her family, and her affair with Ben Horne. I mean, there are certain moments, as we all know, in season 2 where it just gets a bit ridiculous involving her character. I feel like they get to a point where they're like, well, what do we do with her now? So it just becomes ridiculous. Just utterly ridiculous. But for me, the Catherine Martell of season 1 is fantastic. And I love her performance, or Peggy Lipton's performance in season 1, episode 6, because we've seen her so self-assured and so confident, and all of a sudden she realises that in fact she's the one who's being played, and she's desperate, and she reaches out to Pete for help, and I think Pete asks why, and she says, because I've got no one else, because of the way I've treated other people. So yet again, another fantastic complex character within Twin Peaks that perfectly demonstrates why this is one of the best shows and my favourite show of all time. Now this is part 1 of the tier list. Part 2 will be coming up very, very soon. I feel like this is a good place to leave it, and as you can see, there are plenty of wonderful characters to rank in part 2. So, excuse me, I will see you in part 2, where we will continue to rank the characters, and we will properly arrange them in order from the very best to the very worst. So I will see you in part 2, people. Enjoy watching Twin Peaks, have some cherry pie, have some coffee, and remember, the owls are not what they seem. I will see you in part 2.